sailing currently on the high seas to Cozumel at tomorrow. I'm hoping the Wi-Fi is going to hold. Time I tried a live stream, it did buffer, so I had to record a pre-recorded version and upload that. So I hope you've managed to watch where it cuts off, but I think I'm back for now. If it keeps on cutting off, I'll go and I'll do a pre-recorded video. Can you see the comments coming through now?
Yes.
Okay, so without further ado, let's kick off before it buffers again. I'm going to talk about the Fab Four Reunited, and of course I am talking about the newly created Prince and Princess of Wales, and of course the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Now, there's been much media speculation about the whys and the what-fors of how they came together, but the one thing that we definitely do know is that William and Catherine and Meghan and Harry did reunite at Balmoral. They came outside of the gates and they inspected the flowers for over, I think might have been about 45 minutes. So they spoke to the people that were congregating. They got to really intently read all the floral tributes that were coming in. Now, to discuss briefly all the whys and what fors, there were early reports coming out that Prince William had extended an olive branch to Prince Harry, either by text or by phone call, in which William had invited the Duke of Sussex to come with William and Catherine on this walkabout. Now, other reports did say that King Charles III had ordered Harry to do this. The palace has denied this, so I think we can discount the fact that King Charles had ordered anybody to do anything. I don't really think that would have worked anyway. So that leaves us with the fact that perhaps, either William or Harry had extended an olive branch to each other, probably more likely William to Harry. Apparently there was a 45-minute discussion. Now, of course, we don't know the details of that, or even in fact if it did happen. I don't think there has been any kind of official confirmation either way on whether it happened. But the one thing that we can take great strength from, and this is something I said before in previous videos, is that sometimes a family death, a family tragedy can either go one way, it can either push people further apart, or it can help reunite people and bring people together. And it seems in these very, very early days that at least we have had one example of the family reuniting and coming together. Will this be a permanent fix? Will it be the start of a journey of reconciliation? Of course, the Queen, one of the Queen's values was reconciliation, whether it be with, realms and territories in the Commonwealth, or indeed personal family matters. Reconciliation was something the Queen held as a really dear value. And it is sad that it's taken for the Queen's passing for reconciliation to even begin to be contemplated within her own family. So regardless of the whys and what fors, the one thing we do have a visual on is that they did come together. They were all wearing black, dark colours, and they all looked amazing. I mean, Catherine looked stunning, Meghan looked really stunning, William and Harry walked side by side, which is something we haven't seen for a few months, and even then, it wasn't necessarily of their own choosing, whereas this was something that they had agreed upon. Again, the whys and what fors, we don't know, but it was nice to see them together. I'm not one of these people that likes to see warring factions. It doesn't do anyone's mental health any good, yet alone the people actually involved in it. William and Harry, they're not supposed to be apart. I mean, think about Diana. Diana would have wanted them to have come together and be brothers. But we do know from what King Charles said in his initial speech that Meghan and Harry are still going to be pursuing their own life overseas. The one thing that we can hope for, and this is, I suppose, one of the reasons why I think King Charles expressed his love for Meghan and Harry in that initial message, is because it was a bit of an olive branch. I mean, just imagine now, if Meghan and Harry continue trash-talking the royal family after King Charles has publicly expressed love and best wishes for them in their future, how is that going to look upon Harry and Meghan? So, I think hopefully Harry and Meghan might change a little bit of their tact, but but still, carry on and enjoy their new lives and their own ambitions and aspirations in the US with doing what they want to do. Do we have any questions on what I've...
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, then I shall move on. The Queen's coffin, the Queen's body, has been moved from Balmoral. Now, details of the Queen's coffin, we haven't actually seen the coffin, but we do have details that it is made of oak. So that will be English oak. We did talk a little bit briefly about what royal standard would be draped over the coffin. It could have been the typical royal standard, or it could have been the Scottish royal standard. Turns out it was the Scottish royal standard. The floral wreath or tribute that we saw on top of the coffin consisted of, I think it was chrysanthemums and also dried Scottish heather from the Balmoral estate. So I thought that was a really, really nice touch. Now, the Queen's body, after being laid at rest, at peace, if you like, at Balmoral, was then moved to the Palace of Holyrood House. Now, this was over a 100-mile trip, and the Queen had already pre-arranged that Princess Anne was going to accompany her body in the car behind the coffin on that journey. So the Queen's body made its way to the Palace of Holyrood House by car. I think it was a Mercedes hearse, I did notice, and that was to rest in the throne room of the Palace of Holyrood House overnight before making its way today to St Giles's Cathedral still in Scotland for a service. So I'll talk about that service in a moment. But one of the things that I did notice was Princess Anne taking a real lead in all of these, of all of the family events, really. Other than when Charles is there, Princess Anne has taken the senior role in the order of precedence. We saw, for example, when the royal children, except Charles, were greeting the body returning to the Palace of Holyrood House. It was everyone waited until Princess Anne walked in, and then they sort of followed Princess Anne in. So Anne is definitely taking a leading role, as so she should. She is the Princess Royal, and if you're going to follow someone, follow Princess Anne because she is amazing. So at the Palace of Holyrood House, it was Princess Anne, her husband, Sir Timothy Lawrence, Edward and Sophie, and of course Prince Andrew. I suppose what I want to talk... there were reports as well, just going back to the Sussexes briefly, because they're staying in the country until after the funeral, staying in the UK, would they or wouldn't they fly in Archie and Lilibet? Now, that has not been confirmed or denied by the Sussexes. I think it may have been a little bit of newspaper talk going on, because really Archie and Lilibet are so young. Would it be too much of a big upheaval for them, and possibly Meghan's mother Doria to literally fly them in for something that they're not necessarily old enough to attend anyway? So I'm going to err on the side of caution with regard to that. I personally don't think they will fly in, but anything is possible. Plus also, Doria does have her own life, and she may not be able to just drop whatever she's doing in her life to accompany the royal children. So we'll leave that there and we'll see what happens. Flowers and tributes have been paid all over the country, left outside Balmoral, Holyrood, really any royal residence that has a connection to the royals. Windsor, Buckingham Palace, so many royal tributes, and of course there are books of condolence up and down the breadth of the country. So if you are in the UK, you can sign those. There are also online books of condolence as well, if you want to. Charles has been carrying on the duties of state. He has met with Commonwealth dispensations from all over the Commonwealth, and there have been proclamations as well made all across the Commonwealth, Australia, Canada, anywhere you can think of, including towns and cities in the UK as well. So there is no doubt in anyone's mind that Charles is now officially, most definitely, the undisputed king. I want to talk now about what's happened earlier on today in the UK, bearing in mind we have a time difference of 5 hours here. So earlier on today, the Queen's body was moved from the Palace of Holyrood House to St Giles Cathedral for a service that was attended by all of the Queen's children. William and Harry were not there, and of course Meghan and Catherine in turn. Prince Andrew was the only member of the royal family not to wear military uniform. Of course, this is because of his forced stepping back of royal duties, and of course not being able to use the HRH title formally. He did, however, wear his medals, and there were reports of a single male, I think a 25-year-old male, was arrested for heckling Prince Andrew. Where I am here, I haven't been able to gather exactly what was shouted and what was heckled. So if you do know what was heckled, leave a comment. I'm sure Matt will read it to me. But he was heckled and he was arrested. But there was a single person. So if there are reports of multiple people, making those kind of remarks, there was only one that was arrested. I do also want to talk about the rumours about the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Waleses as we now refer to them as, possibly moving into the main Windsor Castle, basically. Now, we all know that they've moved to Adelaide Cottage, which is only a stone's throw away from Windsor Castle. I personally don't think they're going to move. They've already had one move to Adelaide Cottage. I don't think they're going to be wanting to move again. Also, the royal apartments at Windsor Castle are usually for the monarch, and we don't know fully which of the royal homes Charles, now as king, is going to use. We know that he used Clarence House as his main official royal residence for London. That has now changed to Buckingham Palace. Of course, his beloved home of Highgrove is actually part of the Duchy of Cornwall, which now is under William. So technically, Highgrove is William's, unless, of course, he wishes to lease it, I'm sure for free, probably, back to his father as his father's country residence. So we're not sure exactly where Charles is going to choose to spend and split his time. The Queen chose to spend the working week in Buckingham Palace. So Monday she would travel back to the palace. She would leave on Friday for Windsor Castle, and that is where she would spend her weekend, returning to Buckingham Palace on the Monday morning. And of course she had Sandringham for any holidays, and of course the holidays in the summer would be spent in Balmoral. We don't know exactly what Charles is going to do. I think he will keep the traditional Christmas holiday at Sandringham. I think he'll keep the traditional summer holiday at Balmoral. Balmoral and Sandringham are both private estates, nothing to do with the country. Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Windsor Castle are all part of the Crown properties owned by the state. So I personally don't think William and Catherine are going to move into Windsor Castle. It may even be slightly smaller accommodation. Adelaide Cottage, in terms of square footage, might actually be a little bit larger. Not as grand as living at Windsor Castle, but don't forget the bulk of the castle is actually a working castle. It is open to the public for the majority of the year. So personally, I can't see a move to Windsor Castle. I think they'll be quite content at Adelaide Cottage, but who knows? Let's just watch this space. So the St Giles service went without a hitch. It was beautiful from what I could see on the TV news reports coming in. One thing to note is once the Queen's coffin was placed in its final position for the service, the crown, the great crown of Scotland, was placed on a green velvet cushion above her head, and of course that is to signify that she was not just a monarch of England and Wales, but she was a monarch of Scotland. And of course Scotland in the past was its own separate kingdom, so that was very significant, and it was nice to see, although in unfortunate circumstances, it was nice to see the crown of Scotland actually having an official use. And of course it was attended by the Queen's 4 children. Do we have any questions coming in?
Yes. What will happen to the Kents? Will they still be an appointment, or will they move now they are no longer working royals?
I think it was. I think it was the Gloucesters moved from the apartment next to William and Catherine at Kensington Palace, so they are already out. The Kents, I don't think there's going to be any change. They will continue to support all of the Queen's cousins that are still carrying out work on behalf of the Queen formally, are expected to still carry out work and duties, not full time, part time as and when required, on behalf of the new King Charles III. So at the moment, there has been no official announcements about the Gloucesters, the Kents, and of course Prince and Princess Michael of Kent. Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about, Prince and Princess Michael of Kent. They are expected to stay in their apartment. But again, there has been no official announcements on if they're going to retire at this point. Of course, it could be a good point for them to retire completely, but at the moment there has been no plans for the Kents or Gloucesters or any other royal relative performing duties on behalf of the now king.
Will Beatrice and Eugenie now be working royals?
No official plans for Beatrice and Eugenie to be working royals, but Princess Beatrice, being the elder of the two sisters, is now a Councillor of State. This was automatic upon the Queen's passing because all the royals shift up a place in the line of succession, and of course the first 5 in the line are Councillors of State. A Councillor of State means that if the King is incapacitated or absent for some reason, overseas or ill, poorly, whatever, the first 5 Councillors of State, the first 5 in the line of succession, can have deputised duties on behalf of the monarch. Any other questions?
That's it at the moment.
Okay, so I'm going to just tap my screen slightly and just see if... Okay, I can just about see a few things. What will happen to the horses? Oh yeah, Andrew and Sarah are going to take on 2 of the Queen's dogs. Mick, spelt M-U-I-C-K, and Sandy. Of course, Fergus passed away after 5 months, but Andrew and Sarah gifted a corgi called Sandy to the Queen. They will take on those dogs. Any other of the Queen's dogs, we're not entirely sure who's going to have them, but as I said before, Camilla is a dog lover, and other members of the family are dog lovers too. So I'm sure, or even staff, even senior staff members could potentially take on one of the Queen's dogs. With regards to the horses, Camilla is a huge horse fan. We're all aware that Camilla and the Queen shared a passion for horses, probably even more so than Charles. I mean, Camilla is horse mad. She's long been known for her association and love and affection of horses. So I imagine the Queen's stud will be retained and probably pushed forward by Camilla. So I wouldn't worry about the Queen's horses. I think safe hands in the Queen consort. Do you have any other questions? Do you think Harry should be removed as a Councillor of State? In terms of being in the line of succession, no, because rules is rules, and he is, of course, in the line of succession within those first 5. However, the bit where I have the issue with is him living overseas, which would make it a little bit tricky for him to deputise any duties whilst being overseas. And we know that he intends to split his time equally once he's sorted out any security concerns he may have, equally between the US and the UK. But it does make it a bit tricky if, for example, he was called upon and he was over in the US. So the only problem I see logistically with Harry being a Councillor of State is the fact that he may be absent. But we do have 5 Councillors of State, which means that if he is absent on those occasions, there are plenty of others, such as Beatrice, who could deputise on behalf of the monarch. Do we have any other questions coming in? I'm trying to see. Anything else? No, and I think that's pretty much all from today. So going forwards, having rested at St Giles Cathedral, the Queen's body will continue its final journey down to London. Now, the Queen's body is expected to fly by aircraft down to London, where it will rest at Buckingham Palace before making its way, I believe the next day, to the Palace of Westminster, which is where the House of Commons and the House of Lords, the seat of government in the UK, it's where we see the politicians debating, will be moved to the Palace of Westminster in the Great Hall. And of course, King Charles did have, again, he made a speech in the Great Hall. So that will be the location where the Queen's body will rest before the funeral. So that's the occasion when the general public will be able to line up and file past. Oh, I forgot to mention the vigil. There's going to be a vigil, I do believe, at St Giles Cathedral, and it's expected to be made up of senior royals: Princess Anne, the King, Edward, Andrew, and possibly, potentially, William and Harry. So there could be the four. This is what I'm imagining is the likely scenario. The four children of the monarch will be at the four corners of the dais, and then William and Harry could potentially make up one either side of that. That is if William and Harry are to be involved. It's expected that Prince Harry will not be allowed to wear his military uniform in the same way that Prince Andrew was not today. Do we have any other questions?
Do you think Archie and Lilibet will be Prince and Princess?
Archie and Lilibet technically are Prince and Princess and HRH in the same way that Lady Louise and James Viscount Severn are. But in the same vein, Edward and Sophie chose not to formally recognise those titles upon their children. Harry and Meghan have chosen not to formally recognise those titles on Archie and Lilibet. So it would be up and adopt those styles and titles. At the moment, they have chosen not to. That's not to say that won't change. And of course, just like Lady Louise and James Viscount Severn, when Archie and Lilibet get to age 18, they can decide for themselves. At the moment, it is their birthright under George V letters patent, unless King Charles III makes his own letters patent, changing it and amending it.
Will the Prince and Princess of Wales maintain the Cambridge title as well?
Yes, William now has a massive collection of titles. His main title is, of course, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. Catherine is now Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales. But he is still a double duke. He is still the Duke of Cornwall, the Duke of Cambridge. He still has all of his subsidiary titles that he was given upon his marriage. He has also formally Prince Charles's subsidiary titles as well. He's now known as the Duke of Rothesay when in Scotland. So William has a lot of titles. So yeah, he is still the Duke of Cornwall and Cambridge as well.
Will we ever see the coffin being lowered like that of Prince Philip?
No. And the reason why is because the funeral is going to be taking place at Westminster Abbey, so it's not actually going to be taking place where Prince Philip was. So the last we will see of the Queen's coffin is when it drives through the gates of Windsor Castle and it closes. There will be a private ceremony where, of course, the Queen will be interred in the George VI Chapel alongside Prince Philip, who will have been brought up through the floor, and they will both be laid to rest together. And then that royal vault, will be sealed pretty much forever, unless there's any maintenance that needs doing to it internally. It will be sealed, and of course, in that royal vault, it's kind of a small royal vault. It only holds a select number of bodies, and that, of course, is King George VI, the Queen Mother. It has the Queen, it has Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and it has the ashes of Princess Margaret. And someone did ask why Princess Margaret was cremated. That was at her own wishes.
Will Camilla still need to curtsy to the blood princesses when she's not with the king?
Nope. Camilla is now the leading lady in terms of precedent within the United Kingdom. Princess Anne will now have to curtsy to the Queen Consort. Camilla is the highest ranking lady in the land.
And is Philip being moved?
Yes. Yeah, Philip has only had about a year and a bit, I think, now, in the crypt where he was lowered down. He will be moved up and interred at the same time as the Queen in a private family ceremony, no cameras.
That's it.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it here. If you have found today's video useful, please give it a big old thumbs up. Please like, share and subscribe. And I will join you again, of course, Wi-Fi permitting, to bring you another royal video. So, from me, mwah, to you all, and Godspeed.